Hello and welcome back. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to pause for a moment. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. Notice your body sitting here. Notice the support beneath you. Notice that for this moment, you are safe. Because today we're going to talk about something that most parents in crisis rarely consider. Safety. Not your child's safety, not yet. Your safety. Your nervous system. Your internal experience. Because when our children are struggling, something remarkable often happens. We stop noticing ourselves entirely. Our entire attention becomes focused on them. What do they need? How do I help? Who do I call? What should I do? What if things get worse? What if I miss something important? What if something terrible happens? The mind keeps racing, searching, scanning, planning, preparing, and before we know it, we're living in a constant state of alert. I know this place really well. When my daughter was in crisis, I spent years trying to stay one step ahead of disaster. I monitored everything, every mood change, every conversation, every school or college day, every sign of hope, but also every sign of decline. I just became hyper vigilant. And whilst I thought I was protecting my daughter, I was just slowly depleting and exhausting myself. What I understand now is that my nervous system had become convinced we were living in a permanent emergency. And perhaps you can relate. Always waiting for the next phone call, the next incident, next misunderstanding or difficult conversation, just the next setback. The next thing that confirms your deepest fears. Living this way is so exhausting, and it's also incredibly understandable because so many of us learned really early in life that the world was not entirely safe. Perhaps you grew up in a home where emotions felt overwhelming or didn't get talked about at all. Perhaps conflict felt dangerous. Maybe you learned to keep the peace. Perhaps you became the responsible one. Perhaps you learned to scan the room and work out what everybody else needed before you paid attention to yourself. Many of us become experts at surviving from a very young age. We become problem solvers, fixers, caretakers, peacekeepers, overthinkers, hypervigilant protectors, and then one day we become parents. And all those old survival strategies come with us. The problem is that survival strategies are designed for emergencies. They're not designed for connection. They're not designed for healing. And they're certainly not designed to be switched on 24 hours a day. When our child enters crisis, those old patterns often come roaring back. Our bodies don't always know the difference between my child is struggling and we are in danger. Everything feels super urgent. Everything feels critical. Everything feels like it has to be solved immediately. And this is where one of the most important distinctions I've ever learned comes in. The difference between distress and danger. Many children experience distress. They feel overwhelmed, anxious, hopeless, angry, lost, disconnected, shut down, withdrawn. These experiences can be deeply painful, but they are not always emergencies. Danger is different. Danger may involve an immediate suicide plan, an overdose, a serious medical emergency, psychosis, perhaps a situation where immediate action is needed to protect life. As parents, we absolutely need to respond to danger. We need to take action when safety is at risk. But many of us have become so frightened that we start responding to distress as though it is danger. And when we do that, we often lose access to the very thing our children need most from us: our presence, our steadiness, our ability to stay connected. I remember so many moments when my daughter was deeply distressed, and my immediate impulse was always to fix, to advise, to reassure, like make a plan, find a solution. But underneath all those responses was something else: fear. But underneath all those responses was something else: fear. I was trying to soothe my own fear. Not because I didn't love her, but because I loved her so much. And that's the trap. Because when fear takes over, we stop asking, what does my child need right now? And start asking, how can I make this feeling go away? Today, I'd like to offer you a different approach. A simple practice that became one of the foundations of my own healing journey. Whenever things felt overwhelming, I would stop and ask myself 3 questions. Question number 1: is my child safe right now? Not tomorrow, not next week, not 6 months from now, right now. Question 2: have I done what is reasonably required in this moment? Have I made the necessary phone calls? Have I sought support? Have I taken appropriate action? Question 3: what does this moment actually need? Not what my fear says it needs. What does it truly need? Sometimes the answer was action, but very often the answer was presence. But it might be a hug, a conversation, a cup of tea, sitting quietly next to each other, listening, breathing, but staying. The truth is that so many situations become clearer when we stop reacting and just start pausing. And so before we finish today, I'd like to offer you a small practice. I invite you to take a slow breath in and out. Allow your shoulders to soften. Feel your feet on the floor and ask yourself, what am I treating as an emergency right now? Pause and then ask, is it actually an emergency? Or is it a moment of distress that needs compassion, connection, and patience? Just notice what arises. No judgment, just curiosity. And one more breath. And as we close, I'd like to leave you with this thought. Your child does not need you to be in a constant state of alarm. They need you to become a place of safety, a steady presence, a calm harbour in a storm. That doesn't mean you'll always get it right. I certainly didn't. It simply means learning again and again to come back to yourself, to pause, to breathe, to remember that fear is not always telling the truth, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stop trying to solve the future and simply meet the present moment. Thank you so much for being here. In our next lesson, we're going to explore something that just transformed my relationship with my daughter more than almost anything else. How to feel rather than fix. I'll see you there.